This is the Aftermarket Radio Network.
Welcome to another episode of Business by the Numbers. I'm your host, Hunt Demarest, CPA with Parmelis & Associates. We got part 2 of our 3-part series about our benchmark report. If you haven't checked out the 2024 benchmark, where we took hundreds of shops around the country, compared KPI, financial, non-financial data, come up with some snapshots of the industry, which is what we covered last week. This week, we're going to dive into some of the intricacies of these numbers. We got all shops, different sizes, big, small, Euro, diesel, general repair, and then also all different parts of the country. That is what we're going to talk about this week. And then the final episode in this 3-part series will be the top versus not shops. I was going to do that this week as part 2, but I feel like, hey, why put that in the middle? Obviously, that's what everyone's looking for, is how do I make more money? So we're going to do that last. Before we get into that, I want to just stop and say thank you to not only you, the listeners, but the listeners who were a part of this benchmark report. This was, like I said, hundreds of shops that were our clients. So thank you again for being our client. But also they had to answer some questions, fill out some surveys, and really dedicate some of their time in order to give you what you guys are seeing now. So a special thank you to all the participants of the benchmark report and also the listeners, and double thanks to the ones that are combos there. Remember, if you want to hear your question answered on here, or if you have an idea for a future episode, shoot me an email at podcast@parmelis.com. And lastly, cannot forget our dedicated sponsors, NAPA TRACS and Promotive, for being such loyal supporters of the show. For over 30 years, NAPA TRACS has made selecting the right shop management system easy by offering the best, most comprehensive SMS in the industry. We'll prove to you that TRACS is the single best shop management system in the business. Visit them online at napatracs.com. That's NAPATRACS.com. If you're looking for a full-service staffing solution that does everything from sourcing, qualifying, creating job descriptions, scheduling interviews, to negotiating job offers, Promotive is your answer. Visit them online at gopromotive.com. Just like I said last week on this, if you have not checked out the benchmark report, there is a link in here in the show notes on there so you can go download a copy. Like I said, you can only participate in this benchmark report if you are a Parmelis client, but the results, the information, the report is free to anyone that wants it. Go ahead, download it. If you want to share it, go for it. A lot of people have reached out to me over the last week or so since we've released this. Hey, can I share this with my 20 group? Hey, can I share this with my coaching group? Of course, share this. This is a big project, but it is not for me. This is not the information that I need. I see this information. All the data that you guys are looking at is data that we see all the time. So as a thank you, as hopefully piece of value for you and your fellow shop owners, share away, and would love it if I saw people getting use out of this. Like a lot of times when I go down through and I start thinking about recording these podcasts, I have a different idea that what ends up coming out. And this week is no different because, like we were doing last week, I'm loosely going down and reviewing this benchmark report that we did. Not sure why I couldn't think of the name of it, but trying to do 2 things at once, nothing ever happens. And so if you're going down through the benchmark, you'll notice that the first episode, we followed pretty closely along there, going down through the different snapshots, some of the trends from last year to this year, and then some of the non-financial snapshots of the way people pay themselves, benefits, and things like that. Now, the natural progression in the benchmark report is the top versus not there, but I think that to grasp the entire idea, I want to jump around and skip through that section, and we're going to actually cover some of the more highlighted snapshot where we look at shops based on shop size, big or small, type of shop, Euro, general repair, diesel, etc., and then also different regions around the country. I think this is really important to talk about this before we even get into the top versus not, because top versus not is a bit of an oversimplification. And when I say that, and I'm going to use this as an extreme example, because I was thinking about this before and I was like, wait, everyone likes to say my shop is no different. I hear coaching companies say this all the time, but as this data shows, that could not be farther from the truth, right? So everyone is operating their own little business inside of their business. And so when I say, hey, my shop is no different, well, what if I'm looking at a 12,000 square foot shop that I paid $50,000 for? Yeah, that's pretty much unheard of most places around the country. And I would say unheard of right now Do I have people in shops that's what they paid for less than 30 years ago? Absolutely. Now, if you're laughing about that, saying, what the heck are you talking about, Hunt? That means that you're probably in an area of the country where that same building could be $5 million. If I have a guy operating out of a 10,000 square foot facility that he paid $50,000 for, even $500,000, compared to a virtually identical shop that is 3,000 miles away that they paid $5 million for, it's going to be very hard for me to take you very seriously if you say, hey, your shop is no different than mine. Absolutely. We are completely different, and that is not a bad thing at all. I get the logic. I get why people say this. There's commonalities on this. There is industry norms. There are standards. But then a lot of times when I hear people getting conflicting information, they try to put themselves into a bucket that they just don't truly fit into. A lot of you guys have a very common shop. 50-50 parts and labor. You guys work on some stuff. Don't do anything out of the ordinary. Don't do super big, heavy line stuff. You are going to be very comparable to a lot of people. If you are an Aston Martin specialty shop where you only work on Aston Martins and you only order stuff from the dealer, I would be very, very, very leery of comparing myself too closely in most all of your KPI metrics. These are extreme examples, but you can see how there is differences all around the country and even in these different parts based on what you're doing. I just did this webinar for all of our monthly clients. Some of this is a little bit of a recap on it, but also some of this we're going to dive into a lot deeper than we might have done there. The first section on this, and like I said, we're skipping through the middle one, and we're in the data by location, type, and size. Our top shop was in the Southwest. I'm not going to say who the top shop was. They know who they were. And when we're talking about top shop, not to bury the lead, it is the most amount of money as a percentage of sales going to the owner. So the top shop averaged almost 40%, meaning 40% of their sales ended up in my client's pocket, either in the form of payroll or profit. If you want to look at it different ways, if you were going to do about $2 million a year, that means $800,000 of that went into my client's pocket. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, he has a really, really good business. Him and his wife have worked very hard, and yeah, can't say enough about it. If we look around the country, we also look at this not only based on shop, but based on location. So we got Southeast, Southwest, Midwest, Northeast, and West. Really probably because of that specific shop. There's a couple others in the Southwest. The Southwest is going to take the crown this year for the most profitable place for shops to do business. The Midwest, which took the crown last year, was not far behind at around 17%, but still about 1 percentage point behind the Southwest. If you look at all areas around the country, Northeast is 14.1, Southwest or Southeast is 13.6, and Northwest is 13.8. Everything else was pretty similar to the average of around 14, other than the Midwest and the Southwest. Like I said, the Southwest and the Midwest probably couldn't be more different if they tried for a lot of aspects of this. We got Arizona, New Mexico that are in there. We got Southern California, probably Western Texas is all going to be in that stuff. There is places there that have very high cost of living, very high employee cost. One of the things that we have probably seen more in the Southwest, if you're going to compare that to the West, because you're going to have similar climate there, and even to the Northeast. Land is expensive, people are expensive. The difference in the Southwest that we can see is if you look at the labor rate compared to some of the other ones, Southwest is able to charge a lot more money than some of these other areas. If you notice on here, one of the things that we see is the West or Northwest on there has the highest labor rate, but almost has the lowest profit. Southwest, from what we've seen, and this is firsthand experience of knowing some of these shops that are in this study, you guys have been able to really get some pretty high labor rates out there. I have a couple clients that are actually in the $300 range for labor rate. All of them are in the Southwest. That has to be saying something. I have a number of clients that are loud and proud, cost more than the dealer, and some of them buy a sizable amount. Virtually all of those are in the Southwest. So yeah, the cost of living and the cost of help and the cost of overhead is expensive there. I'm not going to lie to you and say Malibu is a cheap place to live, but also they are able to reap the benefits of this high cost of living, of having double, triple the labor rates of what we see most anywhere else around the country. Somewhere like the West on there, where we have the high labor rate and almost the lowest profit margin, is a really good example of what I've said time and time again. I do not care about labor rate, neither should you. Stop asking your friends what their labor rate are unless they are doing the similar thing in a similar place. If you are asking in a Facebook group, hey guys, what's your labor rate? This chart right here should show you how worthless the information that you're getting is. I don't care what your labor rate is because it should be relative to the cost of your overhead. It should be relative to the cost of your technicians. And it should be relative to your competition. Meaning, yeah, there's some aspects where you need to base your labor rate based on your cost. But at some point, if you're the only game in town and you're only basing your labor rate off cost, you're ignoring demand. You're ignoring the scarcity of your talent. So a mixture of all that stuff is going to be the bet there. Let me kind of explain that a little bit because I think I bundled up that conclusion without kind of giving it to you. So you should take all this into consideration when you're setting your labor rate. You need to have your cost in mind, meaning, hey, even if everyone around town is setting it this, if that doesn't make sense for my business, then I can't have my labor rate that low. Now, the other flip side of this is if you go and you work into what your labor rate should be, and you're saying, hey, based on my cost, my labor rate should be $200 an hour. If everyone else in town is $120 an hour, yeah, you are going to have major issues. You can't price yourself out of the market. Even though that there is a huge fact in, hey, you need to make sure your labor rate makes sense for you, you also can't ignore the market and price yourself out. So yeah, that's a little bit of a probably something that you've heard before on labor rates. I get asked a lot, hey, should it be based on market? Should it be based on cost? It should be based on both. Yeah, one of those it depends type answers that I know you love to get from accountants. If we look down at here, the last thing on this sheet is productivity. And there was something on here that made me a little bit confused when I looked at this because productivity, like I've said time and time again, is the number one driver for estimating profit. Meaning if I see high productivity, I generally see high profit. If I see low productivity, I generally see low profit. When I look at this has done a pretty good job in the past. And even for this year, it's done a pretty good job as far as being an indicator of our top shops. When we talk about next week, if you look at the top versus not, all the top shops had a higher productivity than all of the lower shops. Does that mean, though, if you have high productivity, that you are guaranteed to make a profit? No, it does not. It is just one aspect of this. And this is why I always tell people is it's a very simple business. We're selling parts and labor, yet it is a very tricky business, and that's specifically on the labor side. Parts is fairly easy. Buy it for low, sell it for high. Labor is the same idea, but we have people, we have productivities, we have efficiencies, we have attitudes, we have sick, we have injuries, we have fatigue, all kinds of stuff like that. And so the labor on this gets trickier. If I'm looking at this and saying, well, Hunt, the highest productivity was in the West region, but that was one of the lowest profits, even though they had the highest labor rate. Why? If you go and you look at the numbers, what you'll see is, yeah, they were more productive than the average. But yes, shops in the West were more productive on average. We're selling this at a higher rate, and we're doing it rather productively. But like we said before, a lot of their overhead costs are much higher than the average. A lot of their labor cost is higher than the average as well, too. So while they're able to do better than the average on productivity, their worse than average cost or increase in cost had them bring that profit margin down. But again, a little bit of an oversimplification. There's a couple different types of shops that are made up into that group. And again, this is why you got to look at this data a couple different ways. And these are just my conclusions. You could have a different conclusion. You could be in a Northwest and know these numbers and have a different reason. Doesn't mean I'm wrong. Doesn't mean you're right, and vice versa on this. Everyone should be looking at this stuff. Everyone should be drawing their own conclusions. Let's face it, your shop management system is the single most important tool in your shop, period. You need NAPA TRACS because it integrates with all the major players, including NAPA ProLink, PartsTech, OE RepairLink, Epicor, Tire Connect, Mitchell 1 Pro Demand, and more. NAPA TRACS has leading-edge tools and technology that your shop needs right now. Unlike the other guys, we'll be there after your installation with the best training and support in the business. Your training includes a learning management system that is tailored to each role in your company. Simply put, TRACS was designed and built for shop owners just like you. It all starts when a local representative meets with you to learn about your business to help optimize your shop's workflow, efficiency, and profitability. For over 30 years, NAPA TRACS has made selecting the right shop management system easy by offering the best, most comprehensive SMS in the industry. After all, it's your shop, so it's your choice. Visit us on the web at napatracs.com. That's NAPATRACS.com. Shop owners, are you struggling to find and retain top-tier talent for your automotive shop? Introducing Promotive, on the web at gopromotive.com. With over 40 years of combined industry and recruiting experience, we're the ultimate staffing solution. We go beyond traditional agencies. Our team provides dedicated recruiters and account managers advising on processes, compensation, and benefits. We focus on placing technicians and service advisors with shops that offer the best culture, training, and long-term growth opportunities. Trust our experience to match the right talent to your shop. We carefully select shops that value employee excellence and provide an environment for success. Our dedicated team leads the entire process, leveraging our industry knowledge and expertise. Partner with Promotive and experience their advantage to help you build a high-performing team that drives your shop's growth. Visit gopromotive.com today and let us help find and keep the best talent in the industry. Another way that we looked at this is big shops versus small shops. This is a little bit hard. When I do this next year, I'm probably going to increase this threshold a little bit. I was trying to find a good median here so that we had a decent sample size on either sides of this. But what we did is less than $1.2 million in sales and over $1.2 million. If you average less than $100,000 a month, you're in the one group. If you average over, you're in the other ones. If I was going to do this again next year, and I will, I'm probably going to move that up to 1.5 million because, just because. So let's look down through here and see some of these differences, some of these similarities. On average, the larger shops had a 1% higher profit margin than the smaller shops. Now, is that enough to make a large jump with? I wouldn't say so. What I would probably say when you get into some of the larger shops is we had less dispersion on some of this data. Meaning when we're looking at shops of $1.2 million or larger, there was a range in profit margin, there was a range in parts margin, there was a range in labor gross profit margin, but there was not as large of a variation as we saw on the smaller side. If you think about it, I think that what we're actually looking at here to a certain extent is maybe not productivities and indicators and differences between shops that are big and small. I think a lot of what we're seeing here is a newer shop versus a more late stage shop as well. This is one where you could have the cart or the horse example is, some of these bigger shops are doing better productivity or having a higher labor rate or making more profit. I'm not necessarily sure that that is because they are a larger shop. I think that some of this has to do with they've been doing this longer, they're more skilled shop owners and have made some of these mistakes in the past that maybe they've rectified now. Personally, firsthand, from when I've looked at this stuff, there is a good and bad. The good about the profitability side of having a larger shop is there are some things that you only need once. You need to register your LLC for one business. Doesn't matter if it's doing $1 in sales or $1 million. You need one insurance policy. You need one utility bill. You need one advertiser. You have a number of different things are only going to be a sunk cost. Now, all that stuff, if you're larger, your insurance gets slightly more expensive, utilities, etc. Some of them have some variation, but if you double your sales, you're not going to double the cost of your insurance. There is some downside to being larger. If you have a 15-bay facility, you probably need some oversight roles. I don't see anyone with a quality control manager doing $1 million in sales. A ton of shops have a quality control person or something like that if you're doing $4 million. While there's some synergy on some of these bigger shops, there's also some positions and some costs that some of the smaller ones don't have. Lastly, on this one, it's a lot easier to get the personnel and staffing in place to have a pretty passive investment in a $4 million a year shop. If your shop's doing $800,000 a year, it's very hard to make it profitable enough to have a hands-off type operation there for the owner. The last section on here that we wanted to go into before I release you guys to check this stuff out, because what follows this is just all kinds of data comparing location, size, and then also what we consider three kind of distinct groups. So we got general repair, which we call general/import. We got general/diesel, and then we got our Euro shops. So really, if you're working on all makes and models, or if you're working on diesel, or if you're primarily European, those are the three different things we're looking at. Again, there's some intricacies here. A lot of our Euro shops are only Euro. A lot of our diesel are only diesel. But then there's guys that kind of split in between. If we look at overall profit, I think that this is something that no one would be surprised to see, but a general repair shop is going to have a higher average profit margin than a specialty diesel or a specialty Euro shop. You might be sad to hear this, but this is not a surprise to me and probably not a surprise to most shop owners. If you're comparing the average repair shop that works on Toyotas, Hondas, Chevys to a comparative diesel shop and Euro shop, you will see a lot of similarities on the financial statements. One of the biggest things that we generally see, though, is that you have lower gross profit margin on the parts for the diesel and the European. Even though the dollars and cents can sometimes be higher on those, from a percentage standpoint, it's going to look lower. So you got to be very careful here because we're not talking dollars, we're talking percentage. And what I mean by that is this. If I'm working at Hunt's general repair shop and I'm putting a water pump on a Honda Civic, that water pump costs me what? $50, right? So if I mark that up 100%, I'm going to sell it for $100. I just made $50. If I'm working on a 5 Series, those have electric water pumps, which is probably going to cost me around $500. I know that my customer is not going to pay $1,000. He's only going to pay me $750. So I sell it to that guy for $750, which is around a 33% profit margin. So if I look at you and I say, hey, you want to do a 33% job or you want to do a 50% job? You're going to tell me, well, Hunt, I want to do the 50% job, right? You've taught me about percentages. It all has to be relative. This is one of those traps. The BMW water pump job is going to give me $250. The Honda Civic is only going to pay $50. So percentages can be misleading a little bit. Any of them that have done those are probably going to say, yeah, I'll take that Honda. The electric water pumps on some of those ones are not the funnest jobs, right? Especially not the all-wheel drive ones. But hey, that's why you guys get paid the big bucks. And that's another intricacy that you will see here. Even though Euro and diesel generally will have lower parts gross profit, generally we will see a higher gross profit on the labor. And if you look at the data here, now even though Euro is a little bit skewed there, but yeah, you will see this lower gross profit on the part side, and then we got 5 to 10 points higher on the labor gross profit side. Honestly, the reason, there's a couple Euro guys that have really changed the script on that recently. So that's why some of my European shops, 30, low 40% range. And lately, some of you guys have been getting a lot more aggressive on the part side. And I have Euro guys in the 50. I don't have anyone to 60% range, but I have guys that average mid 50s pretty well. Now, labor rate, this should not surprise you. Labor rate for diesel, 181, Euro 186, average for general about 159. Would I take any stock in that if I'm a general European or diesel? Absolutely not. These are clients all across the country. There's people in Alaska in this study. There's people in Hawaii. There's people in Maine. A good kind of number to maybe get a rough barometer, but again, not really something that I would use at face value. The biggest thing on here that I think is something that you absolutely should use in your shop is looking at the productivity. This one was pretty shocking. If we look at productivity, and we saw average productivity for all shops was around 57. Now, if we looked at different types, general was around 55, diesel was around 59. Hey, that kind of makes sense. The Euro boys, 78%. European specialty shops are averaging around 20% higher productivity than diesel or import. Why? I don't know. I've seen this firsthand. It seems like that in a European shop, the expectation is at least 100% productivity. I know that is the expectation a lot of times at dealerships. And yeah, I have a ton of people that crank out 120, 130% productivity. I think maybe because of the work is more specialized, some of their labor rates is higher. Some of their labor costs are higher as well too. So you're thinking, hey, this person is going to be a trained professional, very experienced, and that's probably why you see higher productivity. The reason that the general repair shop can get away and still have a higher profit margin is, you know what? If a kid costs me $12 an hour and he's only 50% productive, he's probably my most profitable employee in the entire building. To wrap all this stuff up, there is no single answer here on what makes a good shop. There is no single answer on what makes a bad shop, but we're sure going to try to dive into this even more when we talk about it next week. What I want you to do in the meantime is I want you to take a look at this. I want you to compare yourself to your peers, whether you're a general repair shop, a Euro shop, whether you're big, small, whether you're in the Northeast, Southeast, Southwest, wherever you are. This is the kind of data, again, I wouldn't look at this and say, hey, I'm doing awesome because my number is higher than this one. But this should give you some reference points. This should give you some of those top line numbers that are very, very average and are on a broad swath of different types of shops. And this will narrow down your focus a little bit to truly make sure that you are comparing yourself to your peers. I hope that you get some value out of this. I hope that you share this with someone else that you think could enjoy this. And I hope that you join us next week when we get into the top versus not shops. As always, please share with friends. If you have any questions, ideas for a future episode, shoot me an email at podcast@parmelis.com. Just want to say thanks again for joining me on the Aftermarket Radio Network. You can find all shows on aftermarketradionetwork.com and on your favorite podcast listening apps. So thanks again for joining me on Business by the Numbers. Stay safe out there, and I will talk to you all next week.
You've been listening to Business by the Numbers with Hunt Demarest on the Aftermarket Radio Network. Follow Hunt on your favorite podcast listening app. Let him know what you'd like him to cover. His email is in the show notes. Hunt is all for advancing the aftermarket.